Well, our last time together, I think I started with the phrase, it's not what? It's not about you. So I kind of felt bad about that. So I want to step back and say, it's not about you, but it kind of is too. Just because it's not about you doesn't mean you're not special, doesn't mean God doesn't have a role for you, doesn't mean he doesn't have a place for you in the journey. Ladies in particular, you are the crown of creation. God created the plants and the animals and everything and created man. And then he's like, drum roll, I am not done. Boom, creates Eve. And it's like, she's the best. So you guys are the best. You're the crescendo of creation. So in some levels, you and us, we are kind of special. And yet it's still not about us because it's not just our story. It's our story within a larger story, within a timeless tale, within a larger narrative, what we're calling the epic. And today, as we continue in the epic, you'll find it's still filled with worship and wonder and warnings and wise men, some good news, a good God, a census, a Caesar, a savior, lots of parts in this story. And this story is part of a prophetic foretold story. It's part of an older story, the Christmas story. So it's super cool. And we've been talking a little bit about purpose because if you, Chase and I were we were at the Topanga Canyon Mall. Have you been there? I haven't been there in years and years. I didn't even know it still existed, but we went there. But we immediately go and find the map because it's like, I don't know anything in this whole mall. So kind of like, what's here? Where are we? Where do we want to go? And we got there, I think, about 8:30, and it closed at 9, right? So we're like, okay, we got to be strategic. We're here in 30 minutes. What do we want to hit? And we said food, and then we picked a shop, and then we went to the shop first, and then we got done, and it's like, the food's closed. we didn't time it right. So anyways, in our story, you have to know where you are in the bigger picture. And when you know that, you're not so lost. You're not like, where am I? I feel like I'm in the middle of nowhere, which a lot of people do feel that way. So you're part of this story, and knowing your purpose is really important. Thomas Carlyle said, the man without a purpose is like a ship without a rudder, a waif, a nothing, a no man. And we live in a culture, sadly, a lot of people don't know their purpose. And of course, if you don't know the larger story, it's going to be super hard to figure out your own personal purpose. And as a result, everyone's life is driven by something. And if you know your purpose, we're to be like purpose-driven, as Rick Warren might say. But if you don't know your purpose in life, you're going to be driven by something anyways. And this week, I was kind of just perusing the kinds of things that can drive people, problems, pressure, decisions, deadlines, can drive people. Painful memories, haunting fears, unconscious beliefs. Today, politics and the pandemic alone can just drive people. Like it could fill their mind. It could be like their daily, like, what's the latest? And I think some of the top things that drive people, particularly if they don't know their purpose, are fear or in guilt and anger and materialism and all kinds of different things. Let's just take guilt, for example. If you don't know your purpose with God in the bigger story, you're going to be easily run with regrets, hiding from shame, manipulated by memories. Oftentimes our past could control our future when you don't have that purpose rudder. Cain was like that. I was reading in Genesis 4:12. He was a restless wanderer of the earth. See, once he got outside God's lane lines, killed his brother, lost his purpose, couldn't find his way, he wandered the rest of his whole life. Just aimless. Some people are going to be driven by anger. Resentment. They hold on to hurts. They rehearse their injuries in their minds. They refuse to release their pain. They stew on stuff. And it doesn't seem to matter whether you clam up or blow up or you act in or you act out. Their lives will be frustrated because, again, if you don't see your life as part of a bigger story, you're going to feel thwarted, and you're going to feel angry, and you're going to feel blocked. I wanted this, and I got blocked. You're not going to have that sense of, God blocks it, he must want something else. If he closes all the food court by 9, then he wants us to go to McDonald's. It's like, and I got an M&M McFlurry, and it was like it was God's will. I could have had healthy food, but he shut everything down. But if you don't have just even a playful sense that you're part of something, oh well, God must have something else, you're going to be angry. You're going to be continually protesting because you're going to feel thwarted. Some people are driven by fear. Many people, it could be a result of maybe a traumatic experience or unrealistic expectations or growing up in a high control home. Maybe it could be a genetic predisposition. But if you don't have a higher purpose, fear can grip people. And they're always living with a sense that they missed opportunities. And they're afraid to venture out or take risks. Or, in our case, be an active part in the drama God's unfolding. Let's be an active part. Let's jump into the story. I don't know how it's all going to shape out, but goodness sakes, if we're guaranteed the other side while we're here, let's make a splash, particularly if you're going to live in California. They need to hear from us here, even if we're a minority. But I have a hunch there's a lot more like us if we just start to speak up. So some people are kind of driven by fear, and we know from John, in 1 John chapter 4, he says, perfect love casts out what? Fear. Yeah, there is a relationship between love and being welcomed into a story, and those who are detached and living scared. One translation says it this way: well-formed love, perfect love, well-formed love banishes fear. Since fear is crippling, a fearful life, fear of death, fear of judgment, is one not yet fully formed in love. So fear. Materialism drives a lot of people. If you don't have a higher purpose here, and if you don't have a sense that you're going to have an account for your life on the other side, that you're going to stand before God, and that there's actually a better life based on how you live here, if this is it, then it can be grab all the gusto you can. It can be about money. It can be very much materialistic, even if you're a good person, right? But this is it. I mean, this is all we've got. So there can be a sense of grasping and hoarding and money loving and a desire to acquire. And by the way, that never gets resolved for most people. They don't typically live with contentment. They always want more, more, more. The reason being, of course, is things do bore us. I mean, they're not able to sustain us long term like loving relationships are. So again, you don't have purpose. Materialism could just intrinsically not only shipwreck your faith, as Paul told Timothy, but kind of get a grip on us. I'll throw out one more. Approval. If you don't know you're part of a bigger story, and that God cares for you, has a vital place for you, and that you ultimately are trying to get His approval, you want to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. Like you have an audience of one, in a sense, right? Then you could allow expectations of your parents or spouses or children or teachers or friends to control your life. You could always worry about what others think and what they're saying about you instead of what God wants for you. And you can't serve two masters in any capacity. And so if we're not serving to please God and fulfill our purpose, we're going to try to please others. And that can be a merry-go-round you don't want to get on. Basically, without purpose, motion happens, but there's no meaning in life. Without purpose, there's a lot of activity sometimes, but there's not direction. There's a lot of events, but there's not always reasons for it. Without knowing your place in the story, life will become trite and trivial. It will become kind of petty and kind of pointless, if I could say it. And without this larger epic, our life is going to lack context and perspective and gravitas and transcendence. You're just going to feel untethered, kind of like an astronaut, that just got cut off from his lunar module. Like, what am I doing? I'm like, I don't know. You're not attached to anything. God grounds us in His Word. And He says, I have an epic story that's unpacking and unfolding. The Christmas story is part of that because I'm going to enter into human history, and it's going to continue to unfold as it was prophesied 300 different times before that. And your story is going to fit in that story too, and I'm going to keep this saga going until I return. And then He's going to wrap this story up, and we're going to get a really cool one. So if we, before we jump into today's passage, I just don't mind reminding you, if we know this, if we know our purpose is part of a bigger purpose, our story is part of a larger story, there's so many benefits to life. Just so many. I was listing a lot this week. I don't have time to unpack them all, but when you know your purpose, your life has meaning. It just has meaning. All of a sudden, you are important on your cul-de-sac, in your schoolhouse, at your fire station. All of a sudden, you become a representative, an ambassador. You're God's man or woman, where He has you. And, when we don't have that purpose, we don't have that meaning, we don't have significance, we don't have hope, and it gets really weird. Isaiah, I was reading Isaiah 49, he says, I've labored to no purpose, I've spent my strength in vain for nothing. Even the prophet lost his purpose for a while there. It's reading in Job, kind of lost himself a little. My life drags by hopeless day. I give up, I'm tired of living, leave me alone, my life makes no sense. Job 7. Well, once you get outside the lane lines of God's purpose, it doesn't make sense. Once we stay in it, it really does. So it gives you meaning. Can I give you a couple practical things? If you live according to your purpose within God's purpose, your life will get simpler. Don't you want simplicity? Isn't life kind of chaotic enough? It simplifies your life because it defines what you need to do and what you don't need to do, because you know why you're here. It helps you to order your activities around essentials and kind of what you need to base your decisions on and how you want to allocate your time and what you want to put your resources to. And when you know your place in the story, you can do that. When you don't, for most people I know, because I work with a lot of conscientious people, they do too much. So if I could be just straight with you, most of you are probably doing too much because you're good, hardworking, thoughtful, intentional people. You want your lives to matter. You're efficient. You want to cram meaning into it. But if you step back and pause and go, okay, I'm part of your story. What do you have for me? Not my will be done, but your will be done. Lord, I can't do everything. I only got 24 hours a day, and He has given you enough time to do His will. So if you don't have enough time, you're doing something else. So knowing your purpose can slow you down a little bit and simplify your life. Like, He didn't call me to do everything. And if you feel called to do everything, but you only have 30 minutes at Topanga Canyon Mall, apparently He doesn't want you to see every store there. So you're going to have to because that's what He gave you. And your life is like 30 minutes in the big picture. So it's like, I can't do everything. Well, figure out what you need to do and do that. So hopefully it helps you simplify. Hopefully it helps you to focus. Hopefully knowing your purpose motivates you, because it's fun to be passionate that your life matters. And then maybe before we jump in the story, I'll give you just one more thing apart from all that, is if you know your purpose, this is more spiritual perhaps. it better prepares you for eternity. And that's where we're going. That's where Anita's going. That's where she's at. That's where we're all going. And so our time here, I was reading this quote, many well-meaning people spend their lives trying to create a lasting legacy on earth. They want to be remembered when they're gone. But sadly, an earthly legacy with people is shallow and short-sighted when you could have an eternal legacy with God. I thought that was helpful. So we're not put on earth to be remembered. We're put on earth to prepare for eternity and try to take as many people with us as we can. So that is one of the great things about knowing your purpose in the story as part of a bigger story. Is it helps you prepare us not only to get through this story, this side of heaven, but for the epic story that continues in the eternal state. I want to be prepared for that, and I know you do too. Romans 14 says, remember, each of us will stand personally before the judgment seat of God. Yes, each of us, and we'll have to give a personal account to God. And I want to be able to tell him, like, I couldn't do everything. We didn't have that much time here. But I did what you called me to do. And I knew my life had purpose and meaning in my little city, in my little state, in my little world, because it was part of your story. And that's super, super cool. Okay, so today we jump into Matthew chapter 2. And that was a little bit of a prequel to just remind you. Mary and Joseph are finding their meaning in the story. We need to find ours in it as well. You're going to see 3 different responses, by the way, in this particular passage today. You're going to have Herod in there. Can I hear a boo? Like, boo. We got Herod, who's a faith-rejecting king. You're going to have the chief priest and the scribes. These are the Jewish, like, highfalutin religious people. Can I also hear a boo? And then we're going to have the wise Magi. They are the only faith-seeking ones in the whole thing, and I can hear a yeah. So there's our big characters. We've got Herod, chief priest, and the wise men. Let's jump in Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. It says, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, during the time or the days of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star in the east, and we've come to worship him. So lots there. Let's go back and unpack that a little bit. We have Jesus born in Bethlehem of Judea during the time of King Herod the Great. Let me give you a little background on Herod. There's several Herods, by the way, in the New Testament, but Julius Caesar appointed Herod's father, Antipater, as governor of Judea, and he appointed his son Herod as kind of the poobah of the day. He quelled a Jewish guerrilla band. So Octavian and Antony declared Herod king of the Jews. In other words, he was able to, there's rioting like we have here in Detroit or Minneapolis, and he was able to stop it. And so he kind of got the title of king of the Jews, but he's not Jewish. There's nothing Jewish about him, but he was able to like reel them in from the rioting. So he developed that. And he's a good guy and a bad guy. Most people know he's a bad guy. He's certainly a bad guy, but I want to just do him a little justice. He was a capable warrior, orator, diplomat. He gave some tax money back to people who were in need. During the Great Famine, he melted down some of his own gold objects, or at least the state's objects, and gave food to the poor. He built theaters, racetracks, entertainment buildings for the people, so they were pretty excited about that. And in 19 BC, he began to reconstruct the temple in Jerusalem. So a lot of people were super grateful for him. He also built the fortress of Masada, if any of you have traveled to see that. So he did some good things, but he's a beast. I mean, Hitler, I'm sure, did some good things too. He gave the people the Volkswagen, the common car. Right? He built some cool roads for the people, but that's not what he's known for, and Herod's not either. This guy was super jealous, super suspicious, super afraid. He had the high priest Aristobulus, which was his wife's brother, drowned because he saw him as a threat. He had his own wife, Miriam, killed. Her mother, 2 of his sons he had killed. When Jesus was born, he killed his 3rd son, his own son. This is like a knucklehead. Insane cruelty at its height with the Christmas story, because he just gets super barbaric. He's a little bit senile at this point. Can you imagine a leader kind of getting a little bit senile? That's kind of hard to believe when you're ruling the whole region. He had, right before he died, and he knew he was kind of, you guys, at least you laugh, right? At least we can laugh, okay? He had many of the distinguished people of his region arrested before he died, because he was afraid that he wouldn't be mourned when he died. So he commissioned that they'd be murdered right after he died, so that there would be a lot of weeping in the region, which is just sick, right? It's just sick. But his most barbaric act is recorded here in Scripture, and that is that he orders the slaughter of all male children who were in Bethlehem and all its environments from 2 years old and under. Why? Because he was threatened. Like he heard there's another king on the way to take his throne. And if a king is born, then that king needs to be eliminated. So even in the Christmas story, which we want it to be like so fun, God coming and angels, it's like, no, you got craziness going on. So he's kind of... I don't know if this is fair to say, but I want to say like an O.J. Simpson. Sorry, I can't think of a better example. Who, an amazing football player, probably a great guy in a lot of days, but that's not what he's known for. He's known for these worst moments, these moments of meltdown, these murderous moments, these jealous moments. Herod is like that. Very threatened, very controlling, very narcissistic, very selfish, big on power. Anyways, we have Magi in the story. Magoi is the Greek, means magic or wise men or astrologers. It's an Iranian word from the east, which means from the rising. They're probably Medes or Persians, and they came to Jerusalem. Notice Jerusalem, not Bethlehem. And they asked, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? Now, in the Middle Ages, there was a sense that the 3 kings were named Caspar, Balthazar, and Melchior. I think they took that just from the 3 gifts. There's like 3 gifts, so maybe there were 3 kings. It doesn't really say there were 3 kings there. This will be on your exam when I give you your Christmas final in a week. All right? How many kings were there? The correct answer is, I don't know, but there were 3 gifts. We do know that, right? They bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But they're probably, priestly political class of Parthians, east of Palestine, skilled in astronomy, maybe some sorcery, knowledge of science, agriculture, mathematics. They did control judicial appointments, according to Esther 1. They were high officials in Babylon under Daniel. So, anyways, Magi come, and they're precarious folks, but they're asking in verse 2, where is the one who's been born King of the Jews? For we saw his Greek word here is astera. We get our word like asterix from it, or I think we have a flower, asters, a flower. Where was his star? We saw it in the east. and we've come to worship him. Now, I took some notes for Jim because I'm like, he's Mr. Star Guy, so I'm like, okay, was it a genuine star? Could it be Jupiter, king of the planets, Jupiter and Saturn, forming sign of the fish, low-hanging meteor, an erratic comet? Is it just the glory of the Lord? I'm like, I'm going to let Jim tell us. Like, what do you think?
None of the above.
None of the above. There you go.
No, you have to know who these people were. They were interested in astrology, so they'd be looking for the movement of the planets in the sky.
There you go.
In this case, the planet Jupiter, which was considered to be the king planet,
Right.
was in conjunction 3 times with the royal star, which was Regulus. And this is what attracted the astrologers and sent them on their journey.
See? And that's going to be on your exam, too, when I quiz you.
Even better, it was in the constellation Virgo, the version.
I forget we have so many brilliant people, so
There were a lot of things that lined up.
there were a lot of, and God used it. You know, one of the things I just love is that for Magi who love stars, like you guys, God gives them a star. I just think that's like so great. I mean, to the fishermen, right, he said, I will make you fishers of men. You know, to Luke the doctor, he said, it's not the healthy who need a physician, it's those who are sick. In other words, he really God personalizes our journey. If it was me, it would have been breadcrumbs to the manger, right? Because I like food. It's like, just follow the cookies, right? And they saw cookies all the way to... So, but we have Magi, we have a star, and God, by the way, does use not only stars, but he uses kind of his glory in the transfiguration. Moses came off the Mount Sinai, and his face seemed to have a glow with the shepherds. There was this light when he appeared on the Damascus Road, right? Saul knocked off his horse, and later Paul. God does use light in lots of cool ways, and here he uses a star. But let's see what King Herod has to think about it. Verse 3, when King Herod heard this, he was thrilled, right? No, he was disturbed, troubled. It means alarmed, agitated. This word in the Greek is kind of interesting. It's the example I have is if you took a Coke can and you shook it up and then you opened it. Because it means to like really rattle, to stir. So Herod was rattled. Again, he's a little bit older now, losing a little bit of his edge. And now he hears he's going to be threatened. There's another person who wants his office, who's going to be king. And he is disturbed. And I think what's compelling here is it says, and all Jerusalem with him. In other words, when Hitler or Mussolini or Stalin or Gaddafi or a hornet's nest is not doing well, that's not good for anyone. Like everyone's like, oh, we shouldn't have made him mad. Like it's not good. It's like the Coke thing. Like I hope he doesn't. Like who knows where that could go. So there's a lot of concern. Herod was, I believe, about 70 years old at this time. Our president is currently 79. Caesar Augustus was old and feeble at this time. Tiberius, the head of the Roman army, had just retired. So there was a lot of angst. Like people are retiring and they're kind of old, and maybe there's this new king coming from the east or somewhere that's going to like threaten them. And there was a lot of fear that maybe Rome was. Well, there's a little fear today that Putin is moving some troops into the Ukraine, and China is maybe threatening Taiwan because they think our leaders are a little bit old or not on their game, or there's like a little bit of window. So kind of if you can picture that in a modern sense, that was happening then. Like he's really upset, he's losing it. We don't have the same generals and leaders in place. This could be a real problem. Verse 4, when he called together all the people, that is Herod, chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them, this is in the imperfect tense, meaning he repeatedly asked them, he continued to nag and inquire about them, where the Christ was to be born. And these chief priests are from the tribe of Levi. They had this unique duty. They presided over the Sanhedrin. They were captains of the temple, by the way. That means they did have some power to... They had a little army that served them like temple police. And the scribes were there. In verse 5 it says, in Bethlehem in Judea they replied, for that is what the prophet has written. So here we get to see a little inroad that the Christmas story is part of what the prophet Micah had said 8 centuries earlier. So Herod's asking, where is this new king to be born? And they're like it was told hundreds of years ago, like it's already been forecasted, it's already been prophesied. This is an unfolding story. In other words, Herod, you're just a teeny little part of the story. Like this has been going on a long time. This isn't just a current event. This is part of a bigger story. Micah 5:2. So, anyways, Herod inquires where the child is in Bethlehem of Judea. Verse 6, but you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah. He's now quoting Micah 5:2-4, who will be the shepherd, my people Israel. Verse 7, when Herod called the Magi, I don't know what your translation says. Does it say secretly or secretly, privately, undercover, and found out from them the exact time the star appeared? Why does he want to know the time the star appears? He's trying to figure out the age of the baby so he can figure out what age he needs to eliminate. Because if we can kill everyone that age and under, then the threat is gone. So he's kind of a crafty one. Kind of cuckoo. God's going to warn Mary and Joseph about this threat. Where's he going to send them? Yeah, Egypt, which is kind of where Californians are going today. Idaho, Texas, Tennessee, right? Right? You can picture it, right? Like if there's enough threat here, it's like this is cuckoo land. Like who knows what Newsom's going to do? Who knows what Garcetti's going to do? Like it's just, there's not a lot of stability. Who knows what mandates they're going to tell us to do in the land here? And they're leaving. And Jews had always, by the way, a lot of them had gone down to Egypt. That was a practice for many of them. And so, anyways, God's going to send them there. But he's also going to send them there to fulfill part of a greater story, because Hosea 11:1 says, out of Egypt did I call my son. Are you seeing? I mean, I don't have time to unpack it all, but I just want you to know, he's going to use Herod's craziness to get them to Egypt, to protect them for a time. So you can move to Idaho, you just have to come back. And then he's also fulfilling Hosea and Micah. And like it's like super cool, when you pull back, go, wow, he's even using crazy people to fulfill his purposes, which is kind of cool. Anyways, verse 8, he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and make a careful search for the child. This is Herod is now sending the Magi to Bethlehem. Go and make a careful, diligent search for the child. And as soon as you find him, report to me so I too may go and vaccinate him. What? I don't know where that came from. There's a demon in me. Yeah. Well, it kind of fits, because he says, I want to go and worship him. But we know that's not what you're going to do. You're not going to worship. You want to kill him. So, anyways, a little playfulness there. After they had heard the king, they, of course, went on their way. And lo, this means like amazingly or miraculously or supernaturally, the star they had seen in the east went on ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. Verse 10, when they saw the child, they were overjoyed. They were thrilled. They were pumped. And you can imagine, again, we're back in the day with no street lights, maybe traveling by camel or different means, through the darkness. And then you see the star, and it directs them. It's super, super cool. Kind of reminds me, I was speaking for a Campus Crusade group back in the day, now Crew, from LSU. They were on a trip in Cuernavaca, Mexico. So I flew down, traveled down to speak at this conference. I'm in Cuernavaca. First time I've seen demons cast out, so it's kind of an unusual experience for me. And I'm now driving at night to hook up with this LSU group of students. And it's pitch dark. And I'm in the middle of nowhere. And I'm convinced I'm going to get killed somewhere out here, right? And there was a flashlight taped to a stick shining on a piece of cardboard that said Dave with an arrow. I was so happy. I was just convinced, this is where people get killed. You can hear the music, da-na-na-na, in the middle of Cuernavaca, in the middle of the night. I'm with nobody. I'm just trying to get where I'm supposed to be. And then there's a light, shining on a piece of cardboard. Okay, I think they're more excited than I was, but they are overjoyed. They're super pumped. And verse 11 says, on coming to the house, notice it doesn't say stable here or manger. This is now that they've moved on. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary. By the way, probably Joseph's there too, though he's not listed. They bowed down and they worshipped who? They worshipped him. The only reason why I say that is my fun and friendly Catholic brothers and sisters, I just want them to know they didn't worship Mary. They're not worshiping Mary. They're just worshiping Jesus. We love Mary. We love her. We love her. But they're worshiping Jesus. They knew who he was. And then they opened their thesaurus. We actually have a book called a thesaurus, which is a treasury of words. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, incense or frankincense, and myrrh. So because we have those three gifts listed, we think there's three kings listed, right? But there might be more. And by the way, these Magi, when they traveled, just so you know, it's not like three dudes out there. See the Christmas cards? Like three dudes on three camels with a little star in the background. No, this is like the president traveling. You got to picture 9 black limousines, Secret Service, entourage. When Magi traveled, they had families, they had friends, they had security. It was a big deal for them to travel. So they're traveling together, and they bring some pretty cool gifts. Gold, of course, a precious metal. Incense was like a white resinous gum, but it was like a perfume from the trees of Arabia. Myrrh, kind of a perfume spice. And then in verse 12 it says, having been warned, by the way, by God in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. So here we have the Magi, God using them to go to Jesus. They bring gifts to Jesus, and they were told by Herod to go report to him, because as soon as you find him, I want to know where he's at, to worship him. But then God warns them. They had no idea Herod's intentions, but God did. And God entered their story. I want you to know, because he can enter yours too, and say, don't do that. Don't go back to Herod. We still today believe in walking in the Spirit. Today we still ask that you trust God, pray about it. Doesn't matter whether it's vaxxed, not vaxxed. Do you stay in California? You don't stay in California. Should I take this job, not take this job? Should I marry this person, not marry this person? You take the objective truth of God's Word, and you know what's in and what's out. But then you have the subjective sense of, God, lead me. Through a dream, through a nudge, through a neighbor, through a text, lead me. And God warns them, don't go back to Herod. So maybe we'll stop there today since we have some good food here and stuff. But I just wanted to remind you that you have an epic story. You're part of it. If you know your purpose, you're going to be more fulfilled here, more meaning. Your life will be more simple. You'll be more focused. If you don't know your purpose and larger the bigger purpose, you're going to be driven by something. A lot of people are driven by money or fear or anxiety or something, that fills that vacuum. Today we get to see different characters. Herod we get to see, his purpose was to stay in power at all expense. So he rejects faith. He rejects God. We see that the chief priests and the scribes, again, faith ignoring. But we see the wise men, who we don't know that much about, but they seek him and they worship him and they bring gifts. And today, even as you give gifts during the holiday season, right, it's based on the wise man giving gifts as well. So maybe I'll pause there. Amen?